The first global highway, origins and the secret of silk. The Silk Road was not a single road, but a vast network of trade routes spanning over 4,000 miles. It was the world's first true global highway, connecting the great civilizations of the East and West for nearly 1,500 years, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, religions, and, fatefully, disease. The true beginnings of the organized Silk Road lie in the 2nd century BC. At this time, the powerful Han Dynasty in China sought allies to combat the northern nomadic tribes known as the Xiongnu. In 138 BC, Emperor Wu sent his envoy Zhang Qian on an epic mission to the west. After years of captivity and travel, Zhang Qian returned to China with tales of sophisticated civilizations he had encountered, including the Fergana Valley with its magnificent horses and markets selling goods from as far away as India and Persia. Zhang Qian's reports convinced the emperor to open up a continuous state-sponsored route to the west. The Chinese traded silk, ceramics, and spices for Western goods like horses, wool, and glass. The system had begun. The most prized commodity was, of course, silk. For centuries, the technique for raising silkworms and weaving the fine, luminous fabric was one of the most closely guarded state secrets in the world. Revealing the secret, or smuggling silkworms or their eggs out of China, was a crime punishable by death. Silk was more than just clothing, it was currency. The Chinese paid their nomadic allies in silk, and it became so essential that it was used to pay soldiers and civil servants. This monopoly gave the Han Dynasty immense economic leverage over all its trading partners. The demand for this luxurious fabric was particularly intense in the West, especially in the Roman Empire. By the 1st century AD, silk became a symbol of wealth and status in Rome, highly prized by the aristocracy. The trade created a massive economic problem for the Romans. Gold flowed relentlessly out of the empire and into China to pay for the precious commodity. Roman philosophers and emperors frequently complained that the empire's wealth was being squandered on frivolous Chinese luxury. The tension of this massive imbalance, China guarding its silk secret and the West desperate to possess it, defined the entire early history of the route. The Silk Road was a fragile conduit of luxury and cultural exchange, built on a foundation of imperial demand and technological monopoly. The Middlemen, Parthia, Kushan, and the relay trade. Despite the immense demand for silk in Rome and the desire for Western goods in Han China, very few traders actually traversed the entire Silk Road. The route was far too long, too dangerous, and too politically volatile for direct travel. The trade was instead built on a crucial network of middlemen and relay points. The critical regions controlling the central and western legs of the Silk Road were the empires situated between Rome and China. The most powerful of these was the Parthian Empire, later the Sasanian Empire of Persia. The Parthians were masters of the desert frontiers and fiercely guarded their role as the primary intermediaries. They understood that their economic power depended entirely on controlling the flow of goods and preventing direct contact between the two global giants. They purchased silk from Eastern traders and then sold it at massive markups to Western merchants, a process known as relay trade. The Parthian and Persian empires grew fabulously wealthy by acting as the toll gate between East and West, enforcing high prices for coveted goods like silk, spices, and jewels. Further to the east, the Kushan Empire, which spanned parts of modern-day Central Asia, Afghanistan, and India, also played a vital role. The Kushan Empire served as a crucial cultural and geographical link. It was through Kushan territory that the road diverged, connecting the main caravan routes to the lucrative maritime trade routes of the Indian Ocean, adding spices, cotton, and gemstones to the flowing stream of goods. These middlemen empires had no interest in seeing the Western and Eastern powers communicate directly. Their geopolitical strategy was to maintain the distance and the mystery surrounding the commodities. The Silk Road was not only a conduit for goods but also for ideas and culture. As merchants traveled, they carried not just bales of silk but also religious texts, artistic styles, and technological know-how. Most significantly, the route became the primary artery for the spread of Buddhism. Originating in India, Buddhism traveled along the trade routes, taking root in Central Asia, and eventually finding a massive following within Han China. The stunning Buddhist cave temples carved into the cliffs of Dunhuang in western China stand today as enduring testaments to this cultural exchange, a physical record of the thousands of monks, artists, and pilgrims who traveled the dusty, dangerous highway. The Silk Road was solidifying its role as the nervous system of the ancient world, linking disparate cultures and creating a truly interconnected global economy, entirely reliant on the cooperation and greed of the empires in between. The Golden Age, Tang Dynasty prosperity and cosmopolitan cities. By the 7th and 8th centuries AD, the Silk Road entered its most prosperous and vibrant era, often referred to as its Golden Age. This period was underpinned by the stability and immense power of the Tang Dynasty, 618–907 AD, in China. The Tang Dynasty was one of the most powerful and cosmopolitan empires in history. It actively encouraged foreign trade and cultural exchange, extending its military and diplomatic reach deep into Central Asia, securing the vital trade routes from bandits and ensuring the steady flow of goods. The Tang capital, Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, became the largest city in the world and the eastern terminus of the Silk Road. It was a spectacular metropolitan hub, welcoming merchants, diplomats, and religious figures from across the known world, from Persians and Sogdians to Arabs, Indians, and Japanese. At its height, Chang'an hosted distinct quarters for foreign traders, demonstrating an unprecedented level of openness and multiculturalism. The wealth generated by this trade did not stop at the Chinese border. Central Asia thrived, giving rise to magnificent cosmopolitan oasis cities that became the crucial arteries of the trade network. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, in modern Uzbekistan, became centers of learning, architecture, and commerce. These cities were melting pots where Chinese silk was exchanged for Roman glass, and Buddhist philosophy mingled with newly arriving Islamic texts. This period also witnessed the increasing dominance of Sogdian merchants from the region around Samarkand. The Sogdians were the undisputed masters of the overland trade. Fluent in multiple languages and with vast networks of family and business contacts, they controlled much of the intermediary trade between China and Persia, serving as the cultural and logistical backbone of the route. Crucially, the Tang era also marks the moment when the Chinese technological monopoly began to crumble. While silk remained important, other goods and inventions traveled westward. Paper-making technology, which was a closely guarded Chinese secret, finally began to spread. This invention would later fuel the growth of literacy and bureaucracy in the Middle East and, eventually, Europe. The Silk Road under the Tang was a true cultural bridge, facilitating the largest and most sustained exchange of art, science, and goods the world had ever seen. However, this golden age of overland travel would soon face a new, powerful challenge: the rising tide of Islamic power in the West and new, lucrative maritime alternatives. The Islamic Crucible, trade, technology, and the Abbasid Caliphate. Following the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West and the decline of the Sasanian Empire in Persia, a new massive power emerged to dominate the central and western reaches of the Silk Road, the Islamic Caliphates. By the 8th century, the Islamic world stretched from Spain across North Africa and the Middle East to the borders of China. This unification of vast territories under a single political and legal framework created an unprecedented zone of free trade and stability across the entire Middle East and Central Asia. The Abbasid Caliphate, centered in its magnificent capital, Baghdad, became the intellectual and economic heart of the world. This era is known as the Islamic Golden Age. Merchants were actively encouraged, and Islamic law provided a secure legal foundation for contracts, banking, and trade across tremendous distances. The Islamic world made crucial contributions to the Silk Road trade, transforming it from a simple conduit of goods into a true engine of global innovation. 1. Banking and finance. Islamic merchants pioneered sophisticated financial tools including checks, SAQQ, the origin of the English word check, letters of credit, and complex partnership structures. This made large-scale, long-distance trade safer and more efficient. 2. Technological transfer. The Abbasids perfected the art of paper-making, learning the secret from Chinese prisoners of war captured in the 8th century. Paper replaced expensive parchment, dramatically lowering the cost of books and bureaucracy, and fueling the Islamic world's explosion of scientific and literary output. Three new goods. The Islamic world introduced vital new crops and products to the global market, including sugarcane, cotton, and citrus fruits, which traveled both east and west. A pivotal cultural moment was the translation movement in Baghdad, where Islamic scholars meticulously translated and preserved classical Greek and Roman texts, philosophy, mathematics, and medicine that had been lost to the Latin West. The Silk Road was thus instrumental in safeguarding the knowledge of antiquity. For centuries, the Silk Road became essentially the Islamic highway, with Muslim merchants controlling the flow of goods and information from the gates of Constantinople to the Chinese frontier. This period of stability and centralized control brought prosperity, but it also increased the risk of dependence. A shock to the system, whether political or biological, would now rapidly travel across this highly efficient network.
The Great Disruptor, Pax Mongolica, and the Unification of the Road. The 13th century AD brought the most radical and violent transformation in the entire history of the Silk Road. An overwhelming force erupted from the steppes of Central Asia, uniting the vast expanse of Eurasia under one banner, the Mongol Empire. Starting under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongols swept across continents, destroying empires, obliterating cities, and establishing the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. The destructive initial phase of their conquest, particularly in Central Asia and Persia, was catastrophic for many of the great trading cities that had anchored the Silk Road's golden age. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara were ravaged, and their intricate irrigation systems were destroyed. Paradoxically, after the initial storm of conquest, the Mongols created a period of unprecedented stability known as the Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace. Once the territories were conquered and consolidated, the Mongols were practical rulers who understood the value of trade and communication for maintaining their massive empire. For the first time since the Han Dynasty, most of the Silk Road, from China to the Middle East, was controlled by a single political authority, or at least successor states like the Golden Horde and the Yuan Dynasty. The Mongols actively protected the trade routes, enforcing safety and efficiency across vast distances. This meant that travel along the Silk Road became faster, safer, and less encumbered by border controls or middlemen than ever before. This period saw the greatest exchange of people and knowledge. It was during the Pax Mongolica that the most famous Western traveler of the Silk Road, Marco Polo, journeyed from Venice to the court of Kublai Khan in China, where he remained for nearly 17 years. His travelogue, The Travels of Marco Polo, opened European eyes to the immense wealth and sophistication of the East, motivating future generations of exploration. However, the very safety and unification provided by the Mongol Empire proved to be a fatal flaw. The seamless network allowed for the rapid movement not just of silk and spices, but of disease. The efficiency of the Mongol routes provided a perfect pathway for the catastrophic epidemic that would soon follow. The unification of the road would lead directly to the unification of human tragedy.
The fatal cargo, the Black Death, and the Great Contraction. The efficiency and unification achieved under the Pax Mongolica, which made trans-Eurasian trade easier than ever before, also provided a seamless highway for one of history's most devastating biological catastrophes, the Black Death, or bubonic plague. The plague bacterium, Yersinia pestis, is believed to have originated in the high-altitude grasslands of Central Asia, a region that was connected to the Mongol trade networks. The disease, transmitted primarily by fleas living on rats, found perfect vectors in the vast caravans of merchants, soldiers, and livestock traveling along the well-protected routes. Around the 1330s, the plague began its inexorable march eastward and westward. The Mongol Empire's security ensured rapid travel, meaning the disease spread faster and reached further than it could have in earlier fractured eras. A widely cited pivotal event occurred at the siege of the Genoese trading city of Kaffa, modern Feodosia, in Crimea. Mongol forces, suffering from the plague, allegedly used a horrifying form of biological warfare by catapulting the infected corpses over the city walls into Kaffa. Genoese merchants fleeing the city carried the deadly cargo with them, sailing back to Constantinople and the Italian port cities of Sicily and Genoa. Within months of reaching Europe in 1347, the Black Death exploded into a continent-wide pandemic. The plague killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people globally, It wiped out an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population and caused similar devastation across the Islamic world and China. The impact on the Silk Road was catastrophic. 1. Demographic collapse. The drastic reduction in population severely curtailed both the production of goods in the East and the demand for luxuries in the West. Economic disruption. Trade nearly ground to a halt as cities closed their gates, merchants died, and the entire logistical chain broke down. The risk of long-distance travel became simply too high. Free political fragmentation. The Mongol successor states, already struggling with internal issues, were weakened by the plague and began to fragment, leading to renewed instability and banditry along the routes. The Black Death achieved what no empire had been able to. It effectively sealed off east from west. The overland Silk Road would never fully regain the stability and prominence it held during its golden age. The world's great superhighway had tragically become the world's most efficient conduit of destruction. The Great Pivot. Decline of the land route and the rise of sea power. Following the demographic and economic devastation wrought by the Black Death, the Great Overland Silk Road never fully recovered its former glory. Several factors converged in the 14th and 15th centuries to hasten its decline and signal a major pivot in global commerce. First, the Mongol peace collapsed. As the Mongol successor states fragmented, political stability along the critical Central Asian routes vanished. Banditry, localized wars, and increased taxes levied by competing minor rulers made overland travel dangerously unreliable and prohibitively expensive. Second, the Ming Dynasty, 1368–1644 AD in China, which overthrew the Mongol Yuan dynasty, adopted a more isolationist policy. Fearing renewed foreign influence and invasion, the Ming focused on internal stability and dramatically reduced official state-sponsored trade along the western frontiers. This closed the primary eastern terminus of the Silk Road. Crucially, European demand for Asian goods like spices, pepper, and cinnamon remained robust. However, the costs and risks associated with the fragmented land routes, which involved multiple greedy middlemen, forced merchants to seek a safer, cheaper, and more efficient alternative: the sea. The Maritime Silk Road, a network of sea lanes across the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, had existed for centuries, but it now became the dominant global conduit. Ocean-going vessels could carry vastly larger quantities of bulk goods, such as timber and textiles, at a fraction of the cost per ton compared to camels or donkeys. This shift in power was best demonstrated by the Chinese treasure voyages, led by Admiral Zheng He in the early 15th century. Zheng He commanded fleets of massive ships that dwarfed European vessels, sailing as far as East Africa. These voyages projected Ming power and established new trading relationships across the oceans, effectively redirecting the flow of goods away from the dangerous Central Asian interior. As the overland route withered, European powers, particularly the emerging maritime nations of Portugal and Spain, began to perceive a radical opportunity. If they could bypass the entire network of Islamic and Italian middlemen by finding a direct sea route to Asia, they could corner the lucrative spice trade and reap enormous profits. The decline of the Silk Road directly motivated the European impulse that would lead to the Age of Exploration. The land route, which had connected the world, was replaced by the oceans, which would ultimately be used by the West to dominate it. The Great Detour, Exploration, Empire, and the Maritime Takeover. The fragmentation of the overland Silk Road and the rise of Ottoman power in the 15th century created an impossible dilemma for Europe. They desperately needed Asian luxuries, but were completely reliant on hostile or expensive intermediaries, primarily the Italian city-states and the Islamic empires. The desire to break this monopoly became the singular driving force behind the Age of Exploration in the late 15th and 16th centuries. The goal was simple yet revolutionary: find a direct sea route to the source of spices and silks. The Portuguese pioneers of maritime technology successfully rounded the Cape of Good Hope. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached Calicut, India, establishing the first direct sea link between Europe and Asia. This voyage, bypassing all the overland Middle Eastern middlemen, immediately devastated the pricing structure of the old Silk Road. The Spanish, seeking a western passage, inadvertently initiated an even greater transformation. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west and discovered the Americas. This event fundamentally changed the nature of global trade forever, shifting the economic center of gravity from the Mediterranean and Central Asia to the Atlantic Ocean. The maritime European powers, Portugal, Spain, then the Dutch and the British, built vast new empires based not on land control, but on naval supremacy. They established fortified trading posts, factories along the coasts of Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, effectively seizing control of the production and transport of lucrative goods like pepper, tea, and eventually, opium. The Overland Silk Road, which had been the nervous system of Eurasia for over a millennium, was now entirely marginalized. It was faster, safer, and infinitely cheaper to ship goods in vast quantities across the ocean in a Dutch or British vessel than to move them slowly, expensively, and dangerously by camel caravan across the Central Asian steppes. The long-term impact was profound. The flow of wealth, power, and innovation shifted decisively from the inland empires of Eurasia to the coastal, seafaring nations of Western Europe. The age of the caravan was over. The age of the global naval empire had begun. The network that once connected East and West now stood as a physical monument to a lost era of land-based imperial cooperation. From global highway to forgotten route, the Industrial Age. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the age of the great caravans across Central Asia was largely over. The Overland Silk Road, once the heart of the world economy, became an economic backwater. The final demise of the traditional Silk Road coincided with the rise of the Industrial Revolution in the West. This technological shift fundamentally altered the nature of global trade and the types of goods being exchanged. The old Silk Road was built for the exchange of luxuries, light, high-value goods like silk, spices, and precious stones, which could absorb the high cost of slow, dangerous land transport. The new global economy, fueled by steam power and mass production, demanded the bulk transport of raw materials, cotton, coal, iron ore, and manufactured goods, textiles, machinery. The sea lanes and the newly established global naval empires were uniquely suited to this massive scale of bulk transport. A single steamship could carry more cargo faster and more securely than thousands of camels. The land route could not compete. Despite its economic marginalization, the legacy of the Silk Road remained etched on the global map. 1. Cultural fusion. The religions, Buddhism, Nestorian Christianity, Islam, that had spread along the route were deeply embedded in Central Asian and Chinese culture, permanently altering the demographic and spiritual map of Eurasia. 2. Linguistic and artistic influence. The artistic styles, motifs, and shared stories that traveled the route continued to influence the art and architecture of distant lands, from the frescoes of Dunhuang to the patterns of Italian Renaissance textiles. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Central Asia became a subject of imperial competition, the great game between the Russian and British empires. But the motive was no longer trade. It was strategic control over territory. The old trading cities like Samarkand and Bukhara became silent monuments to a forgotten cosmopolitan age, overshadowed by the speed and scale of the modern world's rail lines and oil tankers. Yet, as the 20th century drew to a close, a growing globalized economy and a rising new superpower, China, would look back at this forgotten past. They saw not a dusty history, but a strategic blueprint for the future. The very idea of the Silk Road was about to be dusted off and revived for the 21st century geopolitical arena. The 21st century revival, Belt and Road, and the new geopolitics for centuries, the Silk Road was a relic, a historical footnote overshadowed by maritime trade. But in the 21st century, the ancient route is making a spectacular geopolitical comeback. In 2013, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, or the New Silk Road. This massive, multi-trillion-dollar undertaking is the largest infrastructure project in human history. Its goal is simple: to resurrect the ancient trade arteries through a network of railways, highways, ports, and pipelines, reconnecting China directly to Central Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. The BRI aims to achieve two crucial things: economic security, to secure new sources of energy and raw materials and open up new markets for Chinese goods, bypassing the vulnerable, US-controlled maritime choke points; 2. Geopolitical influence. To project Chinese power and influence across Eurasia, creating a new Beijing-centered global economic order. This modern revival is fundamentally changing the landscape of Central Asia, funding massive infrastructure projects in nations that were once isolated and landlocked. Just as the Mongol Empire sought to unite the world under one secure system, the BRI seeks to create a vast, efficient economic zone under Chinese influence. The new Silk Road, however, is not without controversy. Critics in the West view it as a strategic challenge, a form of debt-trap diplomacy that makes poorer nations economically dependent on Beijing. Furthermore, the sheer scale of the projects raises questions about environmental sustainability and internal stability in some partner nations. The story of the Silk Road, which began with Chinese silk and Roman gold, has come full circle. It is no longer about spices and ceramics, it is about oil, internet cables, and the future balance of global power. The ancient land route has re-emerged as the central battleground for 21st century geopolitics. The Silk Road teaches us that connection is rarely benign. It links prosperity with devastation, luxury with exploitation, and culture with conflict. It was a catalyst for technological exchange, the spread of religion, the rise of great empires, and the horrific travel of the Black Death. From the first camel caravans under the Han Dynasty to the modern high-speed rail links, the Silk Road is the enduring symbol of global interconnection, a constant reminder that the East and the West are fatefully, inextricably linked.